All right, the cryptocurrency bull market and what do we think is going to happen? This is NC Hammer Crypto. My name's Neil. Let's get into this technical analysis. So we're looking at Bitcoin, and we had this bullish pendant building up right here. We broke over that top line heavily. We retraced on the 19th and touched on this support line again. And you can see this orange line is also testing as support, which is beneficial for the push upwards. And like we had talked about in the video, I believe 2 videos ago, we were potentially moving up to 108, which is currently happening. With that being said, let's look at some of these others. We got Doge. Doge made a massive pump back here on the 9th or 8th, and then we tested support around 0.21 as expected, also testing off the 200 EMA. Doge would be a really nice potential buy to enter. Not financial advice, but it is looking like it's building support, and you could see that you could consider this left shoulder, head, and then a right shoulder. And then after that, we finish out this cup and handle and start pushing back up towards the 0.45 and eventually $4. BNT has just been an astronomical hit. We had the entry all the way down here. If you're on my signal channel, you nailed this entry at 0.35, and you are currently up over 100%, 100.9%. And still continuing. It has very strong support. It didn't reject up here heavily and like come all the way back down to 51 cents. Depending on what Bitcoin does, that could still potentially happen. As you see back here in December, it had that major pump and then a major crash and tried to break that high again, which did not happen. However, I believe we are going to be heading back up towards 0.96 cents and beyond with BNT. So even though it seems high now, maybe wait and see for the 200 EMA to get a little bit closer and the guppy, CM guppy to start pushing it up. The way I like to see it is a CM guppy, when it's red, it's a lot of water pressure, like a waterfall, pushing it downwards, and eventually it gets built up. You have that little rock that helps move the current flow, and now it becomes hot water, and I consider this more of a fire, and it doesn't want to touch into the water heavily, and it starts pushing back upwards. That's just an outtake on BNT. XYO is building its funky little pattern that it does, and is also trying to fill out the cup and handle pattern. And this pattern with XYO has very volatile pops, as you see like back here in December as well. And we could see a potential quick push up to 0.023, trying to finish out this cup and handle. It is also holding over the 200 EMA on the daily and building support over the fair value gap. So XYO is starting to build up and look pretty nicely for entry. QNT has been very nice entry and exit. We had a nice scalp, very minimal scalp, but we sold around here and bought around, I believe, 92.3, and then had the entry. I believe we are going to tap and break this downward trend line, and after that we could see some major push up with QNT potentially all the way back up to around 170, 150 maybe. But I usually like to look around 120, 130 with this Fibonacci retracement at 0.618, this orange box right here. Looking at XRP. XRP has been building up nicely, building some support. You can see here on mine, I have the inverse head and shoulders pattern built up, and it pushed it downwards, and then the inverse head and shoulders right here. And I believe we are going to see that push up towards this area around the all-time highs of $3.20, keeping in mind that Bitcoin had broke that pendant and is having that continuation push upwards to 108,000. XCN has been building up, but this is one of my favorites, 2,000% gain this past year, and we see that it had that major push back here in April 10th, all the way up to around 2 cents with the rejection and building this. If you're looking at this, let's do the dot. We can't do the dot either. Okay, so when you're looking at this area, it's got that downward movement, building the downward wedge, and it's building support off of this black trend line, pushed up, came back to touch it, pushed up, and it can't keep pushing lower than this green CM guppy, that being the hot water now. Pushed it up over and out of that downward wedge is what we wanted to see. However, with Bitcoin doing its consolidation, it also had consolidation on an XCN and is still trying to hold over that downward wedge. If we remove all this, you can see that it did the downward wedge and it was trying to break and hold above. Right now we want to see this push up and break over this point right here and eventually push over the 0.02. And this 200 EMA will start curving upwards and trying to use this as support, which I believe XCN has some major potential to move upward, as it is also finishing up the cup and handle pattern. But I believe XCN is going to start pushing up. If Bitcoin does not push and hold that 108, if it gets some heavy rejection, we may see some rejection on XCN as well, and maybe even test down on this bottom support. However, it's all speculation. What I also like to point out is this dotted black line being from the top of this point, pushing down, showing more of that triangle, that heavy resistance that got broke. And now I believe we could even come down and touch this resistance before pushing back up. But XCN, if Bitcoin does hold at that 108, I believe we could be pushing up another 24% here soon, and potentially the 89%. But this is pennies compared to what XCN's potential can be. If you have a cent or 2 cents, buy some XCN, see what happens. This year alone, it's been over 2,000%, which is astronomical for this bull run. We were looking at Echelon Prime, and I wanted to bring this out that we had our entry and exit on Echelon Prime and the reason why we had the entry and exit. So Echelon Prime was using this as support. We had our entry right here when it was starting to push a sell at this point, as it was very high. And you can see that down here on the RSI, it was pushing up and out of the RSI zone, and it had to have some retracement for the healthy market, which is exactly what happened right here. Let's see if we can do this. Nope, can't use an arrow. So it had the entry right here, and we pushed up towards around $4.20, broke even higher. But to keep the market healthy, if you're looking down here at the RSI, it pushed up and out of the bounds of 70 or 60, 70 area. And after it pushed out, needed the healthy retracement, pushed back down, and used this line, this black line right here, as a stronger support. So you can make it a little bit thicker. And once it used that as support, we had one more option or potential to push upwards. We had a nice scalp within this area, and it did not push over this high. And so then it started making a downtrend, which made it a little bit more bearish. And the main reason we had exited this trade is because it touched this lower line again and broke through it. We exited around the $4 mark. It had that little bit of a push up, and it broke that line and started to continue further downwards. So we did not want to be longer in Echelon Prime any longer, and we are currently waiting to see if it can hold above this 200 EMA right here. That's the majority of what I wanted to bring up. We'll also bring up GRT, LCX, a few others. LCX is starting to look a lot more bullish. Inverse head and shoulders right here, and you can see that it pushed up, came down, had that little bit of a retest. And with that retest, I believe we are going to see some bullish momentum with Bitcoin pushing upwards to push over this 200 EMA. And the main thing we want to see is it break this downward trend line. However, this would not be a bad entry point, as we are seeing some pretty strong bullish momentum to hit that downward trend line. It's over 100% gain. And you can see that something similar happened right over here when it broke over that 200 EMA, had the quick retest, and then took off. And with this potential move, that was around 112% as well. So GRT is starting to look better and better, and has astronomical potential to be a lot more than what it currently is. LCX, everybody's been talking about LCX, and it is starting to build a little bit of support. You can see this wicking out near the bottom, starting to try and push up through the CM guppy. It is a lot of pressure, a lot of water pushing down on this. However, it is starting to build a little bit of resistance. You can see it's trying to build some higher lows. However, the thing that's concerning is that this is an upward wedge channel. If it's more of an upward wedge have a tendency to push up and then break downwards. However, if this is a channel, we could see a consolidation pushing up slowly over that 200 EMA, and eventually we want to see it break this trend line. It is 13 cents right now. If you're buying at 17 cents, it's not a bad idea. Once you see that support line, it's not a huge major difference. However, buying at this point up is a 25% increase, a little bit more sketchy. So I'm holding off to see if it can hold above the 200 EMA before entering into LCX, even with the utility that it has. DNT is starting to break upwards. You can see that this might be an upward trend line, diamond pattern. We really want to see it break over this downward trend line, and the potential move upwards could be around 74%. However, the potential downward move could be around 84%. So keeping that in mind, this coin is very volatile. When you're looking at something like this, the way I see it is it's just a ridiculous amount of money within the minutes if you can do the scalps. A little bit volatile, a little bit, sketchy. With this one blue bar, you can see it's around 58%. And with that 58%, the next daily bar is 30% decrease, 48% decrease, and continuation on that. So keep that in mind that it does have a lot of downward potential. However, when it does pop, you can get a very nice scalp. And this would be another example. You see in the exact same day on DNT, we had that support on this orange line, a push at 42% and immediate rejection back down to nothing. So very sketchy coin, but very quick potential every single day if you're keeping an eye on it and scalping that. I do a few more. ADA starting to build some support, looking a little bit nicer, holding above the 200 EMA. And building somewhat of a inverse head and shoulders. Right here you can see more inverse head, something like this. Here's the shoulder, and we could see this finish out something a little bit more powerful, but we could see this push up. We want to see it break over that 0.91 before further continuation, but ADA is not a bad option for stability. I'd always recommend going into XRP over ADA, but both are tax-free on capital gains. Tornado Cash. I keep bringing up Tornado Cash. It can wash Bitcoin. It's very potential, very, very nice potential for this coin. High of over $400. We are currently at $8.60. I was saying potentially have an entry around $7.50 when we were breaking this downward trend line, and now we are getting some strong support on that 200 EMA. If you can't buy Torn on your platform, I always recommend MEXC. They have the lowest trading fees of any platform. Definitely see if you can use it within your country. But MEXC does have Tornado Cash, I believe, and for $8 for a potential 400, it's not a bad bet. If you got 8, 10, 20 bucks, buy a couple Torn, see what happens this year. I believe it has some major potential. And the last one I'll bring up, or last two, is XLM and Toshi. Toshi had that major pump. It's not finished. Had some support right around here, around the 0.00065. And I believe we are going to see a push back up towards its all-time high, being -10. And that is some pretty heavy gains. If you're looking at that potential, it is a meme coin, so don't put all your money in it. 200% potential. However, I would look more into some other coins that are more stable than just a meme coin. But it does have some nice potential in Toshi. And then also Stellar Lumens, trying to fill out that cup and handle pattern, inverse head and shoulders. And XLM has a very similar setup to XRP. If we look at both charts, there's XRP, XLM had the exact same thing. we are within this fair value gap in between these two yellow lines, and we want to see it push up, break that. We have the 200 EMA being a strong support. XRP is definitely a good bet, whether it goes up or down. It's dollar cost averaging. I highly recommend putting more money into XRP when you can. That's it for today. This is NC Hammer. Like and subscribe if you want. I always recommend Grass if you want free airdrop money. I have a reference link below. I appreciate if you use it. You need it to start Grass, so I would appreciate if you use mine. MEXC, blah, 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 Coinbase, free airdrop money. All references are in the link below. I will see you guys on the next one, and good luck. Have fun with it.